Let's get more reaction now to President Ramaphosa's briefing to the nation. I'm now joined from Cape Town by the Democratic Alliance's Chief Whip, Siviwe Gwarube. Siviwe, thank you so much for your time this evening. Quite a bit of speculation before the President spoke as to what he could be addressing the nation on. Of course, ordinary South Africans would have wanted the President to speak to them about why they don't have electricity, and in some parts of the economic hub, why they don't have water. But this was all to do with state capture, with the Zondo Commission in particular. What did you make of what the subject matter was of the President's speech at this time of where the country finds itself?
Good evening, Marcel, and good evening to your viewers. Of course, look, our view is that this address was really, it said nothing new. And quite frankly, I think South Africans would have preferred if the president was addressing them on matters of electricity and water shortages in some parts of the country, because quite frankly, the president, a billion rand later, and 4 months after he had received the last tranche of the Zondo Commission report, has essentially brought nothing new, because one would have expected that after 4 months of mulling over this report, of having seen what some of the recommendations are, at least the president could today announce some tangible action steps as to what he's going to do, particularly as it pertains to the executive. We heard nothing about who he's going to be holding accountable in the executive, who he's dismissing from his executive. And we know that a number of them have been implicated in state capture, yet they still enjoy the job security in the cabinet. And so what one can really surmise here, Marcel, is that the president is buying time. This is not a president that is really taking this report seriously and wanting to see the reforms implemented. This is a president who's looking at December and the elective Congress and the conference that the ANC is going to be having in December, and looking at it and thinking that, well, he's not going to make any moves, any major moves ahead of that conference within his cabinet in particular. And so really, it is honestly an insult to people who were looking at the state capture report, at the State Capture Commission for years, and knew that we spent public money having that process done, and now looking at it and seeing that, well, what has really amounted from it? Nothing really concrete has come from it, except the president has really told us everything that we know. And so now it is incumbent on the National Assembly and the presiding officer, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Siviwe to realize that ultimately the president, as it pertains to Parliament and Parliament's role, has kicked for touch and has brought the ball back into Parliament's court, as we had argued months ago, that Parliament now needs to do its job in holding people accountable insofar as the parliamentary mechanisms are available to them.
This address to the nation, of course, also comes after a rather intense 48 hours or so. We heard interesting statements coming from three former presidents for various reasons, with different baggage in each corner. We had that gathering of the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation, where we had stakeholders from various circuits, various spokespeople and analysts and experts in their field making very strong statements. The golden thread being this presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa, and depending on who was speaking, they spoke about this president being under pressure. And of course, then speaking to an analyst afterwards, the point was made that nothing that is said in the political sphere right now can be looked at without the lens of the ANC's big elective conference in December. What is your view on that? You mentioned it earlier, but is that really what it is? And the rest of South Africa must now just hold on to their hats and weather the storm until we get to the other side of the 20th of December?
And Marcel, for me, that's the biggest tragedy, because ultimately South Africans are expected to work their lives and their expectations around the ANC. Because now that the ANC has an elective conference at the end of the year, we can't expect any action from government, any form of accountability from the president. And quite frankly, that is upsetting. That is really something that should anger all of us, because while, yes, the ANC is a governing party, but ultimately we have elected a president that ought to uphold the Constitution first and ought to really put South Africans first before his own party political interests. And really, this address tonight re-emphasizes the fact that the president will forever put his interests and his future in the ANC before party interests, because there's so much that the president had at his disposal, which was exposed in this process, which he could have announced. As I said initially, that there are ministers in his own cabinet who have been fingered in this entire process that he could have, in the last 4 months, decided to dismiss as a show of good faith and a show of really commitment to this process. But instead, he comes and he analyzes what we've all read. And then one wonders, why spend R1 billion of public money and 4 months to study the report if you are going to come and address the nation and tell us about what the report says? We want to hear from our president. We want to see leadership from the president about what is going to happen, who's going to be held accountable. The inferences to whistleblowers is really also a complete indictment on this presidency, because we have people like Babita who have died having been whistleblowers in this entire corruption scandal. Yes, there's nothing that we can take away from this process or this address from the president that says this is how whistleblowers are going to be protected. So quite frankly, this address should have never happened if the president is not ready to actually lead.